Good evening, my lost souls. This is Violet Nocturne, your guide through the shadows. Tonight, I'll share a tale that might just have you praying you never hear the sound of an ancient bell. It's called The Chime of the Sinister Bell, and it starts like this. There was once a small, seemingly innocent antique shop hidden at the corner of an old cobblestone street. The shop carried peculiar trinkets, objects you wouldn't find anywhere else. The smell inside was aged wood, mothballs, and ancient parchment. But one item stood out. High above the shelves, in an unlit corner, hung a brass bell. It was tarnished with a strange crimson tint, as if it had been soaked in something much darker than mere water. It was labeled simply, "The Summoner's Toll." Lila, a curious amateur historian, often visited the shop in search of items that told storied tales. On a fateful evening, the bell caught her eye for the very first time, although she was certain she had scoured every inch of that shop before. Its mysterious presence captivated her, and she found herself reaching for it involuntarily. As her fingers touched the cold brass, a chill ran up her spine, and the proprietor, an aged man with cataract-clouded eyes, gasped audibly. "You mustn't buy that," he whispered, visibly shaken. "The Summoner's Toll has a history of death. It has claimed entire households, brought ruin to villages." His voice quaked as he explained that the bell was said to belong to a long-dead keeper of souls. Each chime of the bell, the legend went, summoned a vengeful spirit who stole a piece of the ringer's soul. Of course, in Lila's mind, this only added to its allure. Against the shopkeeper's desperate insistence, she purchased it. As she stepped out of the shop, clasping her new prize in trembling fingers, she could have sworn the bell let out an almost inaudible hum. Was it her imagination? The hypnotic hum lingered, gnawing at the edges of her thoughts. She brushed it away, dismissing it as a product of her own anticipation. Hours later, back at her tiny studio apartment, curiosity got the better of Lila. She couldn't resist the urge to test the bell's supposed powers. Its surface was colder than before as she prepared to ring it. At first, nothing followed the first delicate chime. But then, her kitchen window quivered in its frame, though the night outside was eerily still. Then, a faint, guttural humming swelled, resonating through her thin walls. A voice, clear yet soaked in malice, whispered Lila's name. She jumped, nearly dropping the bell, but she was utterly alone. Or so it seemed. A shadow, amorphous and writhing, began to pool in the corner of her room. It slithered along the ground, reshaping itself constantly as though it were liquid and smoke combined. Lila's heart hammered in her chest, and she tried to scream, but her throat seemed paralyzed. The shadow solidified into something, a humanoid figure, impossibly tall, its face veiled by undulating darkness. In an instant, she grasped her mistake. The bell wasn't summoning ghosts, but something much worse, a harbinger of torment. "Your soul," it hissed, in a voice that felt like shards of glass scraping across her mind. The shadow being surged forward. Frozen by fear, Lila was powerless as it reached through her chest. She didn't feel pain, at least not physical, but a wave of despair and emptiness washed over her, sweeping away every memory that once defined her. She collapsed as the shadow vanished, the bell falling beside her with a dull clang. But this was merely the beginning. In the dawn light, she awoke trembling, a deep sense of dread replacing her usual zest for life. Her memory faltered. Faces she loved were unrecognizable, and her reflection in the mirror looked dimmer somehow. The bell sat there, innocently unassuming, but she now hated it. She tried tossing it into the dumpster. Yet, when she returned to the apartment, it sat smiling malevolently on her mantel. The next night, unable to resist, she rang it again. Perhaps curiosity remained, or perhaps the bell compelled her. This time, the dark figure returned quicker, its whispers incessant, maddening. It tore more of her soul, and though she did not look physically aged, she felt 100 years older. Wherever she turned, a shadow would flicker in her periphery. When she left her apartment, her path was plagued by sudden gusts of frigid air, whispers in languages she didn't recognize, and an ominous sense that she was being hunted. Word traveled fast among her friends and colleagues of her rapid decline. The once lively Lila was now a shell, haunted and muttering nonsense about the bell. Her closest confidant, James, decided to intervene. At first, he chalked it up to stress, but then he laid eyes on the accursed bell himself and felt its malignant pull. When he tried to move it, its surface burned him, despite it being cool just moments before. Desperate, James turned to the shopkeeper, demanding answers. The old man, with a sorrow etched deeply into his withered features, explained that there might be a way to break free, but few had survived the attempt. The bell, it seemed, demanded a trade. To reclaim what it had stolen, one must offer another soul, a willing soul. Gathering his courage, James sought out Lila. She was pale and wispy, almost ghost-like, her voice faint. He explained the ritual to her, but her glazed eyes betrayed her fragility. How could she possibly condemn another to this nightmare? But the bell had its own twisted sense of humor. In the dead of night, it began to chime on its own, softly at first, then growing louder and louder. Shadows spilled forth from every corner, engulfing her room in total darkness. A storm of whispers assaulted her ears, demanding one thing: a soul, or her own complete annihilation. And so, with shaking hands, Lila turned the bell on James. Tears streamed down her face as she rang it with trembling fingers. The shadow figure emerged again, more solid and ravenous than ever. As it reached for James, he looked at her with betrayal and sorrow before the darkness consumed him in entirety. For a moment, she felt the weight of her actions, but the bell didn't stop there. Its crimson hue deepened, dripping and pooling on her floor as laughter echoed throughout the room. A deep, cruel laugh. In her despair, she realized the story was never about escaping. Once called, the summoner's toll always delivers torment, no matter the cost. And so, Lila disappeared into obscurity, her soul a fragment of what it once was. The bell, of course, found its way back to the corner of the antique shop, waiting patiently, eternally, for its next victim. So, dear listeners, if you ever come across a bell that hums to you, do yourself a favor. Never pick it up. Sweet dreams, if you can.